Hi, Neil McDonnell here. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I just want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live, where we do at 12 to 12:30 every single business day that's out there. And it's where I discuss process and procedures for you to achieve success in the federal market. If you don't know this, I spent 20 years as a small business owner doing roles and jobs similar to whatever role that you might be filling right now. And for the last 5 years, since 2018, I've been focused on teaching people that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. And the process, when followed, will lead to success. And today we're going to talk about 8 ways to find and meet people. This is part of the process of government contracting, right? Of sales, is how do I find my buyers? How do I meet with my buyers and begin to have conversation? So we'll get started there. One thing I wanted to mention is that if you haven't done this, put your company and core competency in the comments. I want to know who you are, your company and your core competency in particular. Yesterday, the day before, for example, I was able to rattle off multiple people's names who are doing cyber. And when I'm working with customers who are doing cyber, I can put them together if it makes sense, because in my head, I've got a 1 or 2 word description of your core competency. And so I want that. Go ahead and do that and put it in there. So today, I just want to let you know what we're going to talk about in this next 25 minutes or so. The first thing is I want you to understand that today's session, today's video, if you're watching the replay, is for you if you feel like you're not finding enough people, you don't know who the decision makers are, right? Or you do know who they are, but you can't get meetings with them. If either one of those pains that you feel or challenges that you face, then this is what I'm trying to address today in the training. And so I'm going to cover 3 topics as we go forward. First, I want to do a decision maker overview. Make sure we're on the same page of what are we talking about when we say a decision maker, and then some of the details around that. And then the last 2 sections that I want to talk about is 8 ways to find decision makers, and then 8 ways to meet decision makers. I think originally when I put this post out of this event, it was 8 ways to find and meet. But because I was doing my homework and just making sure I can prepare today, I decided to just give you 8 ways to find and 8 ways to meet decision makers. So one thing I want to ask you as we go forward is tell me who your agency is, right? One agency, if you're trying to go after them, who is that? If you feel comfortable, drop that into the chat. Actually, if you feel uncomfortable, drop it into the chat. If you're here today or you're watching this in a replay, put it in so that I've got an agency and I begin to understand who you're trying to reach. And then maybe I talk more specifically to you, either right now or in future events that I do. So let's talk about decision makers and just understand them from a holistic standpoint. The first thing I wanted to do is just answer this question: who are decision makers as it relates to federal contracting and sales? I see DHS, thanks there, Navy. Come on, you can't pick Navy and HHS, one agency. So decision makers, I call them focuses of dissatisfaction or focuses of power. Focuses of dissatisfaction are the people with the need. You can think of them, they have the responsibility for the requirement or scope of work that you're trying to go after. And so those decision makers tend to be the program office personnel. They could be related, like business units that are connected to the program office you're going after, or users connected. But that whole pool of people who are really focused on requirements, their focus is a dissatisfaction. That's one type of decision maker. And then the other one are focuses of power. These are the acquisition related people. Obviously, a contracting officer fits right in there, but these are the people who are influencing more the acquisition approach to an opportunity, or in the government's case, a requirement, right? And so in your case, when you look at these people, think about the program office or the acquisition office. One other group you might think about is the selection board. When you're looking at an opportunity, especially larger level opportunities, most of the opportunities I work on, there's a pretty significant selection board. We want to be able to identify who's on that selection board. The more of those people you can identify, right? The government's not going to tell you, so you have to do your work. But the more of those people I begin to identify that are going to be on the selection board or might be on the selection board, it allows me to pursue them and meet with them. And I'll talk about that in a second. One thing, as you begin to reach out, I talk about, in particular, focuses of dissatisfaction. The only way you can go through this exercise of finding people to meet, finding decision makers, is if you understand their roles before you start trying to find out their names. And let me give you an example. My last company, I did Microsoft SharePoint, and so Office 365, that whole world. And my typical roles, I might see somebody in that's a decision maker, a person I want to meet. Obviously, like CIOs at a top level, but maybe director of software development or director of network engineering. These type of roles are ideal for me. If you do something related to the facilities, like either construction or road painting, janitorial type services, maybe you're looking to meet a facilities director, or director of logistics, maybe for inside, right? Not supply chain logistics, but logistics of a building, an installation in the military, whatever. So understanding those roles are really important before you start trying to find people. That's the homework you will do. That's research that you're going to be doing into the agency. So before you start finding people you want to call, do the research to understand what roles in this agency, CISA, Department of Labor, like labor, for example, who in labor is responsible for IT, or who's responsible for facility maintenance, like I talked about. When you understand that, then you can begin to find the right people, because you'll narrow your research down even tighter to just those offices within an agency. So the last thing I wanted to mention here at the beginning is just the value of decision makers. If you meet decision makers, right, not just the small business specialist, not just the contracting officer, but if you meet true decision makers, these people who will be on the selection board, the program office type people, then they're going to help with business development. So in the business development frame or time period, you're going to be influencing that agency to think the way you want to think. An example is, if you're in software development, maybe you want to get them thinking about software applications on Salesforce instead of like .NET or Java type apps or whatever. And so you're trying to influence how great it is to develop in Salesforce and use their platform. Well, in the business development range, you can influence them, tell them how great it is, show them white papers, videos, whatever. And as you get in there and meet decision makers, your ability to influence those people goes up, right? If you don't know who they are, and if you can't have a meeting with them, you really are restricted on how much influence you can do. And the other reason it's important to meet decision makers is during capture. In capture, you're doing less influence and more discovery, right? And I mean capture as it gets into the later levels of this, like right before it's getting ready for an RFI and an RFP to drop. You want to be able to get in there and talk to decision makers in a way that will allow you to have a strong winning proposal score. If you haven't watched that video that I did before, watch that. But a winning proposal score is this score that tells you how great is your proposal that you'll submit. And the more tasks you do, the higher that score will be. Well, interacting with decision makers will enable you to learn about their challenges, their true objectives, things that might not be on the paper. And those things, when you begin to get that information, allows you to strengthen that winning proposal score. So meeting decision makers certainly helps you have a stronger proposal, because you're more attuned to what the government is trying to buy. I hope that makes sense there. And then, so let's move on to the next two sections I want to talk about, right? 8 ways to find decision makers, and then 8 ways to meet decision makers, and 1 way to drink water. So there's 8 ways I just want to list out for you. And they're in order to me of, I think, sophistication or something. So make sure you're doing the first ones that I talk about, and then you keep going up. So the first one is agency websites, right? If you're trying to meet a decision, or if you're trying to find, not meet, if you're trying to find a decision maker, then going to an agency website and looking at the way they lay out the website, right? Looking at their org chart. If you go to DHS, somebody said DHS. If I go to DHS, I can look at DHS and it will tell me, hey, we're organized by components, FEMA, Coast Guard, U.S. Secret Service, et cetera. Well, I can go, okay, that's great. I want to even go down to Coast Guard. And so I go to Coast Guard, and Coast Guard will say, we're organized this way. And I can begin to drill down into the installations or bases that they have. And when I go in there, I'm able to look at their org charts and see their leadership. And I might see the staff, et cetera. So that's one way, agency website. Another way is forecast. And in forecast, agency procurement forecast, when you go in, it's a long list often, but go over to the far right and you'll often see a name, email, and address of a point of contact for that opportunity. And the key is at this point, you're finding decision makers, not necessarily chasing somebody down related to one opportunity, but those decision makers, if you see them on related opportunities, if I want to do SharePoint, but I see a forecasted item for software development in general, I can look over and go, well, that person probably knows who I could be talking to. And so I can go in. So that's a great way. Most times you'll see small business specialists. Other times you'll see points of contact that are in the program office. Excuse me. And then the next way, the third way, is strategic documents. I put these out all the time. I've been putting them out all this week. But strategic documents are documents that the government puts out every year that lists out their goals, their objectives. And often in these documents, they will talk about who's got responsibility for certain goals and certain objectives. So you want to be able to track on that. The next thing you want to pay attention to is industry slides. So industry slides, again, go look at my LinkedIn profile and you'll see that I put tons out. It's one of my all-time favorite things because industry slides come not only with a decision maker, right? You can find them, but you can find what the decision maker is saying about what their program does. You can find what they need from industry, and then you find their name, email, and phone number. I mean, it could not be more better if the decision maker walked over and explained it to you, right? And so industry day slides, just go on Google and search your agency. Hey, I want to find Coast Guard Industry Days, and you can pull it up and you'll see that information. Or, hop onto my profile and you'll see all sorts of them there. Another one that I really like is interviews, right? So interviews are podcasts or YouTube videos. And you can go out there and look at this. One other that I really like is Government Matters. I think it's called Government Matters TV. And Gus, I don't know if you have a link to that you might drop in. But Government Matters TV is like one of the only TV shows I know that's out there. I actually was a guest on their show, and it's on ABC. Most times they don't interview people like me. They interview decision makers. Tell us what's going on. Where are you going as an agency? What are the challenges? What do you want industry to know? Well, that's a great way to find decision makers by paying attention to Government Matters new episodes, and also just going back and looking at all the last, let's say 2 years of episodes. You can go back and search and find some of those decision makers and not only get their name, but you can find out what they're saying so that when you eventually meet them, you're actually speaking their language to a degree. The next thing is conferences. Another way you can meet people. Let me pause for a second. Are there lagging issues? Gus, give me a text. Let me know if there's a lagging issue I got to pay attention to or not. It might be just that one person. Anyways, number 6, I said, was conferences. So, and I don't mean matchmaking events that small business offices put on. I mean true conferences. So an example is in March, I went with a customer to an Air Force conference to help them really navigate and pull out of that conference the value they wanted. And in that conference, we're just meeting all sorts of people, large primes and government agencies, from the chief of staff of the Air Force on down. And there was just hundreds of decision makers or possible influencers in there. And so we were able to just create our list of, hey, this is who's going to be there. This is who I want to talk to. And I just created a checklist to find out who to talk to. But conferences where they're talking about their needs. This conference was perfect because it was a conference of the Air Force to the Air Force, and they invited industry. There's a Navy Gold Coast that's going on in San Diego at some point, right? That's a big conference where the Navy gets their program offices and decision makers to come, and you can meet them there as well. The next one I just want to touch on, let me just check this lagging thing. Okay. Thanks, Gus. So the 7 is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a fantastic way to find decision makers. And I'll give you an example here. And you can go find this on my profile in my past activity. Is the National Geospatial Agency, NGA, put out a post, and I think it was called The Software Way. It was their future looking document of how they really want to get software development moving in the 2022 range, right? And by getting engaged in that document, I was able to see the CTO, the CIO, the CISO of NGA, all these other people I wouldn't have even known their titles from NGA and from other agencies all getting engaged. And there was 5,000 people engaged in there, but I was able to filter it out to the agencies I was looking at. And it was perfect. And if you find similar stuff like that on LinkedIn, you can begin to find and build your own little mini org chart, if you will, of people you're trying to get to. The next one is, and the last one, number 8, is one of the best ways to meet or to find decision makers is to use focus as a receptivity. I describe people in the buyer side in 3 roles. Focus as a receptivity. They'll talk to me all day long. Focus is a dissatisfaction. They have the challenges. And focus is a power. They have the money. So the focus is a receptivity, though. I'll give you an example from just yesterday. Yesterday, I was speaking at a PTAC event, and one of the questions somebody asked me was, well, I've got 3 friends or 3 contacts that are, each of them are 3-star generals. Are, how can I use them, et cetera? And these are all retired generals, recent retired. But what I said was, well, use them as a way to learn about the organizations they just came from and begin to understand, well, who's in there? Oh, I was just there. I know Sally took my role and she's got 3 direct reports and it's John, Tom, and Bob or something. But you can use these focuses of receptivity to help you. One of the best focuses of receptivity at an agency is a small business specialist. One of the best ones out in the, let's say, the nonprofit help world are PTACs. PTACs are tied pretty closely to the agencies that are near them. They might be able to help you understand who the decision makers are. If you go down to Catalyst Center, Lee in Huntsville, Alabama, she knows everybody down there, and she can begin to help you put a picture together of who the decision makers are so that you can then begin to do your homework in preparation of trying to meet them. But anyways, 8 ways that are in there. I'm going to talk in a second about the 8 ways to meet decision makers, but I just wanted to say that if you'd like, I have a handout that I'd be happy to provide, a checklist on decision makers, right? Everything I'm talking about, I have it kind of in this checklist I use in my workshops. And so if you want a copy of that, just let me know by putting 8 ways in the chat and I'll send it to you. And go ahead and do that for a second so I can drink water. Okay, so while you're doing that, if you want to put it in the chat, I'm going to talk to you now about 8 ways to meet decision makers. And these are 8 ways that I use. I think that you should use one of them, and I think you should use all of them, depending on who you're trying to meet. And so let's get started with the most basic ones, and I'll wrap up with my all-time favorite way to meet decision makers. So the first way that I would suggest you meet a decision maker, and this goes on the assumption, all 8 of these go on the assumption that you have already identified who they are, you have their phone number and email, right? So the first way you meet a decision maker, pick up the phone. If you know Sally is the decision maker you want to talk to, pick up the phone and call Sally. My tip for you in this, though, is make sure you have a scripted voicemail that you're ready to leave. Most times people don't answer the phones these days. And so if you get a voicemail, you want to leave a very concise, 30 to 40 seconds at most, concise voicemail that is directly saying that you're basically trying to reach out for a quick intro call. And when you have a scripted voicemail, if she happens to answer the phone, you'll be able to talk to her for a minute and begin to move forward. This training today is not about teaching you how to have those calls, but the first way you meet a decision maker is you got to be willing to pick up the phone, right? The second way goes with this is send a direct email. And so you don't want to spam a whole bunch of people out there. You don't want to go into an agency, find 50 potential decision makers, send them all emails, right? All the same, because they talk to each other. But if you've identified that Paul here is the right person for you for cloud, then you can send a direct email, and that's a good way to reach out to them. One thing I want to give you a tip about emails, and this goes into tomorrow's topic actually, is tomorrow the topic for LinkedIn Live is something along the lines of how often should I call federal buyers, right? And in this case, I want you to remember when you call and leave a voicemail or you send a direct email, unless they tell you no, the answer is always maybe or yes, but it's never no until they tell you no. As long as you're just respectfully and professionally following up every 3-4 days or something, that's fine. Just don't give up. Salespeople, us, we don't give up. Number 3 for how to meet decision makers goes with what number 8 was, I think, on how to find them, is use your referrals and get introductions. So I talked about these generals who knew people as an example. I'm like, well, if you know who they are and you know Sally's in charge, Would you make an introduction? Would you send an email and say, hey, I just wanted to introduce, Neil to Sally, Sally to Neil. Neil's going to follow up and try to get on your calendar. That's it. That's all I ever need from somebody for a referral. But you could get referrals from a lot of those focuses of receptivity, small business specialists, PTACs in particular, but also think about your teaming partners that you might be working with. The whole purpose of matchmaking events and OSDBU events when they have them is not so much so there's a match and a sale right there in the event, but so that you two can learn about each other. And generally, from the government side, they should be trying to help you meet that person. So ask for those referrals, ask for that, most importantly, introduction. Number 4, on how to meet decision makers. So you've identified somebody on LinkedIn. Well, I encourage you to view their profile. I don't know if you know this, but when you view my profile, if I wanted to, I can see that you did. Like some people look at that a lot, but I get too many views, so I don't. But most of us don't get so many views. And so if you view somebody's profile, let's use Paul again, then Paul will see that you have viewed it, right? It's one way of beginning to start to develop that relationship and meet. The next level on LinkedIn that you could do is follow Paul, right? So you found a decision maker, you want to sit there and set up a meeting. You don't just find them and go straight at them, right? You got to get them to slowly know you before they can move on to like and trust, right? Let's get them to know you. And if you follow Paul, if you click on the profile and say follow, you'll get a notice, or Paul will get a notice that says you're following him now. I don't look at the views, but I see when people follow me and I appreciate it. I go look at who they are and all of it. And I'm busy, right? And I see this all the time because for some reason, when somebody follows you, you feel almost drawn to want to find out, well, who is this person? Why are you following me? What makes us a good connection? And I mean it as, I'm flattered that you're following me, not why are you following me? And so if you follow, it's a great way for you to stay engaged, but also for them to know about it. And then the last level of this view follow is connect. When the time makes sense, you connect. And when I connect is when I might use LinkedIn as a way to meet that decision maker saying, hey, you mind if we take it offline and have a quick intro call? So that's LinkedIn. View them, follow them, connect with them when it makes sense. So let's stay on LinkedIn for number 5 here. Engagement on LinkedIn. So I want you to engage on LinkedIn with these decision makers that you like. And what engagement means is liking, giving a thumbs up to some content they put out. The second level of engagement, which is a next level up, and it's actually the best level, is to put a comment in there about whatever they're posting. I posted a DOJ document or something. You might come in and say, hey, great document, thanks for sharing. But don't just stop there. Maybe put in something like, I really liked page 5, 6, and 7, where it was laying out the goals related to IT. That was perfect, thanks, or something. And now I'm looking at it. The reason engagement is so cool when you're trying to meet a decision maker is that almost nobody engages. I talked about that NGA one, for example, a while ago. That was an anomaly where there was like 100 or 200 people engaging. But most times when I look at a decision maker I want to talk to and I look at their content, if I commented on it, I would probably be the only one. Imagine what it would be like if you commented, legitimate comment, relevant comment, but if you commented on something they posted, they would appreciate the fact that you're giving their content some love, but they would also begin to know you and engage you maybe back. And so you don't just do one engagement and hope for a date, but you start doing that. These decision makers are not a one and done type deal. You're trying to build a long-term relationship with them. So LinkedIn engagement allows you to be able to see what they're putting out there and begin to get engaged without needing an invitation to be invited to their discussion. Number 6 is attend events. I talked about the Air Force event I did before to find people. But if you go to an event, it's a great way to meet people who might be a little elusive on phone or email. So at an event, we're both there. I was talking with one of my customers actually went to a huge event. Long story short, they sat down and had lunch right next to the agency's chief data officer. You cannot go hire a decision maker for data, which is what they were trying to do. And they sat down and had a half-hour lunch with them. A little personal, a little talk. They learned about a document they didn't know about, and they set up a follow-up. So, when I go to an event, I always look at the attendee list, the speaker list, and I see who's on there, and I begin to create my plan. You can do that same thing when you're trying to meet people. Go, I'm going to meet these 3 people. If you did that, then you're getting your value from the $1,000 or $2,000 you might invest in going to that event. Number 7 is get to know the direct reports. One of my favorite ways is if I'm trying to meet a CIO, Chief Information Officer, I'll come downstream maybe and try to find some of the direct reports who might not get as many people knocking on their door. And so I can have conversations with them easier. They might be more willing, but I can learn a lot of stuff from them to prep me to meet with that CIO if that's my ultimate target. And then once these people know, like, and trust me, they might be comfortable introducing me to the CIO. So get to know people's direct reports is a good way to meet a decision maker that is a little harder to find. My last way is, and my all-time favorite way, is if you want to meet decision makers at an agency in the space that you're in, respond to RFIs, requests for information. Sources sought are one thing, but they tend to go to the contracting officer and it's about acquisition. But RFIs is where the government's trying to get information about the requirements, the scope, that kind of stuff. I like using RFIs to write full out documents that when the decision makers are looking at it, because it has to go to them. It potentially is going to every one of the people on the selection board, et cetera. And they look at the stuff I write it as if I'm working for them already, so that when they read it, I want them to go, flip through the pages and go, are these guys working for us already? Are we already doing this? And it leads them to go, we need to learn more about this company. We need to hear them talking more about it. They're doing what we're exploring doing. When you write an RFI, don't think of it as this onerous thing that is put on us. If you're only writing to your core competencies, then the only people reading it are the decision makers of your core competency. So it's a great way to do it. And sometimes I find it's a lot easier to do that than to try to do a cold call, because those people will call me. So those are the 8 ways of meeting a federal buyer out there. Finding and meeting federal buyers. Remember to put 8 ways in the comment if you want me to send you that handout. And if you found this valuable, give it a thumbs up. I appreciate that, just knowing whether it's these topics are hitting where you want me to be talking to. And speaking of that, tomorrow I want you to join me in LinkedIn Live. Bring your lunch, or if you're in the East or West Coast, bring a coffee and learn about how often should I call and follow up with federal buyers. That's a question I get asked a lot, and tomorrow I'll be talking about it. I just want to remind you, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is coming back tomorrow for the next event. I'll see you there.